Good evening, everyone. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to the Institute of Mechanical Engineering Aberdeen Area webinar tonight. I'm Tegwyn Northam. I'm a volunteer committee member here in Aberdeen, Scotland. On the top right hand of your screen, you will see a resource option. We have posted some relevant links which we will mention at some point during the webinar. Everybody who has registered for this event will receive an email which will give them admission to the recorded webinar, which will include access to these links. The webinar will also be saved on our IMechE YouTube channel for viewing at a later date. We ask you to type your questions into the question box at the top right hand side of the screen. At the end of the presentation, we will have some time to answer a selection of these questions. We will try to get through as many questions as possible. However, it may not be possible to answer all of them. Before I hand over to Alex Campbell, our presenter for tonight, please allow me to make a few words of introduction. In 2002, Alex gained a master's degree in mechanical engineering with management from the University of Edinburgh. In 2003, he gained a postgraduate diploma in design, manufacture and management from the University of Cambridge. Alex started his career as a team manager at the Baxter's Food Group in Scotland. He then moved into the oil and gas industry, where he worked in various project engineering roles for Wood Group, Inspection and Acre Solutions. Alex is currently a practitioner for the North East team of the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service, or SMAS. This is an organisation that supports businesses in Scotland to make improvements in productivity, culture and behaviours. Alex's presentation tonight is called What Makes a Good Process? Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Tegwyn, and good evening, everybody. Hope you're all safe and well, and thank you for joining me tonight. I'm going to present what makes a good process, and the reason for doing this topic is that it's something that I wasn't taught in university, or indeed in some of the companies that I've worked for. But it provides the foundation for a powerful set of tools for improving business performance. What I'd like you to get from this evening's session is the ability to identify non-value added activities and appreciate the importance of people engagement. Plus, I'd also like for each of you to do something different, something better, either at work or in your home as a result of listening to this. As Tegwyn said, I currently work for the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service. I joined SMAS just over 4 years ago now, and I'm one of 20 practitioners based around Scotland. Whilst we all come from different industry backgrounds, we all share a common passion for manufacturing, and we aim to make companies fitter, happier, and more productive. So how do we do that? Well, what we don't do is go into companies and tell them what to do. No matter how good an idea or process improvement it might be, if it does not gain acceptance from those that will use it, then the results stand little chance of sustaining themselves, nor being as good as they could have been. So what we do is train, mentor, and coach teams within companies with sponsors from the leaders. I was taught that results are a combination of process and acceptance of process, meaning that you could have the best process in the world, but if it's not accepted by those that are going to be embracing it, then the results would be worse than if you had a slightly worse process, but a high acceptance of it. Having said that, I've yet to, by engaging the right people and thus gaining acceptance, I've yet to come across a situation where process improvements are not as good than if their ideas and expertise had not been inputted. So in addition to the one-to-one support that we do with organizations, we also run business improvement academies and learning journeys as sharing with other like-minded companies or seeing relatable good practice is a very powerful means of driving ambition and improvement. So results are in part determined by acceptance, which in turn come from behaviours, which comes from how you think. And I'd like to share with you a mood lift chart, which we often use when working with clients. And its purpose is to gauge where people's thoughts are at. The reason being that positive moods and those that are above the line generally have higher quality thinking, thus higher quality behaviours, and therefore better results than those that are below the line. Now, there are various reasons why you might be below the line, and it's not uncommon or unusual for that to be the case. Some might be temporary blips, for example, something that's going on outside of work that you have on your mind, whereas others might be more longer lasting, especially with all the stuff that's been going on this year. Being positive can sometimes be very difficult, and it's not a switch that you flick from going below the line to above it. It's something that takes time. But there are some very simple things that can be done just to move things in the right direction. Simple things just like saying thank you, recognizing a job well done, and feeling part of a team with a common purpose. I'd like to share an example of that with a couple of projects that I worked on in a previous company. Both had similar scopes of work, delivering subsea control systems, but two very different approaches in terms of people management and engagement. On one of them, the project director was very team-focused. We'd have regular team-building events with people in Aberdeen and in Oslo, where the project was being run from. And not just colleagues within the organisation, but the client that we were delivering the equipment to. This allowed us to get to know our team well and know what the common goal of the project was. We got to know the client and their needs, and it really did make for a great project to work on. Rather than communicate by email, you'd pick up the phone to colleagues and ask them how they were, and you felt like an important part of a team. The result was a project that was a success. It was enjoyable to work on, and the client was happy. Now contrast that to the other project, where none of that happened. Not only the results worse, I actually felt like I was working for a completely different company. I certainly would have said that I was below the line for most of that time working on that project, but there wasn't anything difficult about what made the other project a success. The key thing was that leadership allowed for time for people to pause, take a step back, and get to know their colleagues and customers better. Now, admittedly, some of the team building that we did was fairly extravagant, and you'd probably struggle to justify a business case for it in terms of hard numbers. But the benefits it provided would ultimately pay for itself many times over. And it's just feeling part of a team that can really help your mood and thinking. Feeling like you're giving something back to others, your community, can also have a similar effect. I introduced a client to ESP a couple of years ago. They run the first Lego League in Scotland, where youngsters enter a competition and get to design and build a robot. People from my client were introduced to a local school to support work on their competition entry. And in doing so, the operations manager said they saw an improvement in their behaviours and in their attitude as a result. Nothing was actually changed at work from a process point of view, but there was actually anecdotal evidence of improvements to their outputs as a result of feeling that they were giving something back. And I would encourage everyone on this call to use your experience and your knowledge to share and inspire the next generation into engineering, such as by becoming a STEM ambassador. So that's the first message that I want you to take from this presentation: the importance of a positive mindset and people engagement in order to get a good process. Now I'm going to go into the process side itself. Now you're seeing on your screen the words, the principles of lean. Now before you hang up and think that lean is something that's only applicable to someone like Toyota, I will argue that there are aspects of that that are applicable anywhere, be it at work or at home. And it's one of the 5 principles that I'm going to focus on primarily for this presentation. I shall go through all the principles at a very top level, but in detail on the second one, which is about how to identify and reduce non-value added activities. Now, I mentioned Toyota at the start. You can be credited to an extent for founding Lean and putting it to good use. And one of the best practice visits that we run, or we did run when we could, was to the factory in Derby, where at the time of my visit, they were making the Avensis and the Auris. Now these are both cars coming down the same line, being produced in the order that the dealers were putting the orders in. So you'd have a red Avensis Estate coming down the line with a diesel engine, followed by a blue Auris hatchback. And these cars are coming off the line every 70 seconds, as that is on average the time at which orders for the cars were taken. Now, during the visit, at no point did the line stop. And if you think about the number of parts and the complexities and the number of process steps going on, that's actually pretty hard to comprehend. So what are the 5 principles of Lean? They are value, value stream, flow, pull, and perfection. So I'll do a brief overview of each of the 5 and then go into detail on the second one to understand where value is added and how to identify a non-value added activity. So the first principle, value. This is understanding your customers' expectations so that you are able to deliver exactly what they want, when they want it, whilst bearing in mind what the customer wants now might not be what they want or expect from you in a few years' time. There have been some recent examples of once big names, such as Kodak, Hoover, and Nokia, struggling as a result of changing customer expectations, and brands that didn't exist a few years ago now being dominant, such as Amazon, Airbnb, and Uber. And it's not just about what your external customers expect from you, but also your internal customers, the people that you provide your material or information to within your company. Do you know what they really want? Have you asked them? Or do you just do what you've always done? And looking at it from the other way, how many times in your place of work do you get sent something that you have to change or manipulate because it's not been delivered as ideally you would like it to be? But I'd argue that it's not just about understanding what it is that you do, but ultimately why you are doing it as well. And that's a question that can be a little harder to answer. Worth reading Simon Sinek's Start With Why if you want to understand more about that latter point. So you know what it is that you do, and ideally why you are doing it. But in order to provide that value to the customer, it needs to go through a series of steps, or its process. And each step consumes resource, namely time, people, materials, or energy. This principle is about understanding the process and how it meets the customer's needs. Where is value being added and where is it not? I'm going to go into detail about non-value added activities once I've concluded the remaining principles. But I'd like you to imagine that you're having a house built and you're on the construction site and you're carrying a briefcase of money. Whenever you see someone working on the site doing something that you consider to be adding value, you'll give them some of that cash. So when the frame is being put up, you will give some money. When bricks have been laid, you'll give some money. And when the walls are being painted, you'll also give some money. But you're not going to give any money whilst the workers wait for a delivery truck to turn up and nothing's happening on site. You're not going to give any money whilst someone goes to look for the tool that they need in order to complete the task. And you're possibly not going to give any money for them building a double garage when all you wanted was a single one. And you're certainly not going to give any money when you see that the front door has been put on back to front. So those latter examples, where you're not giving any money, examples of non-value added time. And lean focuses on reducing or ideally eliminating these wasteful activities, thus reducing lead time and allowing you to make more within an existing amount of time. And going back to the people engagement piece, giving more rewarding jobs as a result of getting rid of some of the tasks that you don't enjoy doing. As an aside, if you think lean is ultimately about reducing headcount, then that is absolutely not the case. It's about engagement, having a problem-solving and continuous improvement mindset to deliver value to your customers. The third principle of lean is about flow. Anywhere that flow isn't present, inventory, which as a heads up is one of the 8 wastes I'll be talking about later, will accumulate. This is particularly important when you have a number of similar products coming down a production line. So this is about ensuring that value goes smoothly from one process step to the next, that it's not waiting for something else to clear before it can be moved on. So in order to achieve that, each step needs to be balanced in terms of the time that it takes to complete. Now this is best demonstrated with practical hands-on examples, and once the restrictions lift, hopefully we can run some workshops where we can see and feel this for real. But in summary, each process will have a bottleneck within it, and this is the slowest process step. Time lost at the bottleneck cannot be made up. So if a machine breaks down, that is part of the bottleneck process, you've lost that production time forever. Now, if your bottleneck process takes longer than the rate at which customers' orders are coming in, then that is deemed a constraint. Key to this principle is knowing how long each process step takes. Now, there can be a lot of variability within that, and bottlenecks can move as a result. But understanding how stable parts of the process are, what can be done to standardize it, and then focusing on improving the bottleneck should be priority. I'd highly recommend reading The Goal by Elia Goldratt. It's a very engaging story that explains the theory of constraints really well. Following on closely from how things flow, the next principle is about pull, which is about using signals from downstream of where you are in the process to dictate activity rather than stuff that's coming from upstream. Things that are being pushed onto you. So to help picture this, the difference between a push and a pull system, imagine a line of interlinked paper clips. If you pull the paper clips, you'll get a nice smooth flow. Whereas if you push them from the other end, then you'll end up with a pile of paper clips in the middle. So the message here is rather than react to what is happening upstream from you, the key is to be aware of what is happening downstream towards the customer in order to dictate your activity. So now use some of my amazing PowerPoint skills to hopefully demonstrate what I mean. The final principle is perfection, meaning that there's always a bottleneck. There's always non-value-added activity or waste within an organization. Waste will never be entirely eliminated, and therefore there's always some improvement opportunity to be focused on. And that's the key to this. Making process improvements is not an activity that you do as a one-off exercise. Rather, it should be ingrained as part of a company's culture, that you focus on continuous improvement, so that you're always improving and at the same time engaging the right people and being mindful of what your customers are expecting from you, both now and in the future. So I'm now going to go back to the second principle, which is about the value stream. And I'd like to introduce you to Tim Woods. He's the man that sees waste that others can't. So just to clarify here, when I say waste, I'm talking about a non-value adding activity, not something that you put in a bin. Now, there are some non-value adding activities that are deemed necessary non-value adding activities, such as setting up or changing over a line or production area in order to make or service a product. It also includes legal requirements, such as you doing your tax returns, keeping HR records, having a quality system, etc. So it's stuff that's necessary to be done, but not something that a customer would consider when making the decision to buy from yourself. And I'm sure you've never chosen a product just because you know that the company has a nice set of accounts. And just to make the point that a lot of the examples that I'll be giving in this presentation, they're going to be factory or workshop based, but a lot of it is equally applicable to office based or even home activities as well. Non-value added activities can be classed into 8 different categories. And this is where the acronym TIMWOODS comes in as an aide-memoir to help identify them. So I'll go through each of them now. The first of the 8 wastes is transportation. And this is the unnecessary movement of materials from one operation to the next, or indeed within an operation. Now this might be as a result of site constraints. For example, a company that I worked for, which made subsea control modules, had to make the electronics module in one building and the mechanical module in another. Now this meant that each electronics module had to be transported between the buildings, which did not add value as far as the customer is concerned. And it wasn't a one-man job moving these things. But there are plenty of examples of transportation waste that can easily be reduced, such as some weighing scales which were on the opposite side of a room to where the work was being undertaken. And when asked why the scales were over there, the answer was, well, that's just where the plug is. But to get an electrician to put a socket next to the workbench so that the scales were close to hand didn't cost a huge amount of money, but saved an awful lot of time in terms of moving these ingredients backwards and forwards from the workbench to the scales. So think about whenever you are making something, what is the optimum amount of movement that is needed in order to get it from start to finish? Can anything be improved? The next of the 8 wastes is inventory, specifically having too much of it. Now you might be thinking, how is that waste? Well, for a start, it can take up a lot of space, so it makes it harder to see exactly what is going on. And it's good at hiding or indeed creating other wastes. So for example, let's just say there's a pallet that you want to access and move and in order to another area. But there's another pallet on top of it and another one in the way. So you're then creating transportation waste in order to move all the stuff in order to access what you really need. It's a difficult balancing act to get the right amount of inventory, and the consequences of running out of a part can be catastrophic. I know of a couple of clients who, as a result of the other story that's making the news at the moment, they're concerned about supply, so have ordered in more than they would actually like to, just to guarantee that they can continue production, even though they openly admit that it's causing difficulty in terms of the amount of space that it's taking up. Indeed, you might have seen on the news recently about Honda having to close their Swindon site for a short amount of time as a result of supply concerns. So it's a difficult balance in terms of ensuring that you have the optimal amount of inventory on site. And it's not just true for materials either. Think about what your email inbox looks like. How easy is it to find a specific email? And also for documentation. I see a lot of companies that will keep folders of paperwork just in case, which takes up a lot of space in an office. So the next waste is motion. Now, whereas transportation waste was the unnecessary or excessive movement of materials, motion waste is the unnecessary movement of people in order to get what they need in order to do their jobs. Everything that you use frequently should be stored in a set location, ideally within arm's reach. Stuff that you use infrequently, whilst it doesn't need to be nearby, should be in a defined location. So think about a supermarket. When you go into one, you can tell pretty much within a minute whether they have an item that you are looking for, as you know where to go and look for it, and if it's not there, you know that they've run out. Now, these are places that, in some cases, have tens of thousands of people coming in every single day, and yet it's still easy to know where stuff is and whether it's in stock or not. So why have I been in companies when it's taken literally hours to find one tool that is needed to be used on a job? Why did I spend the best part of half an hour looking to find a new notebook in a previous company that I'd worked for? And again, it's not just materials that I'm talking about, it's applicable to information on a system. In the previous company that I worked for, an engineer actually found it easier to create a new material number than actually find an existing one on a system that was fit for purpose. In this case, there were no standard naming or numbering systems for parts, which made things difficult to find. In the previous examples, there was no defined storage location for either the tools or the notebooks. And even though, in this case, there were numerous stationary cupboards, what there wasn't, though, were standards in place, ownership of them, and defined responsibilities for replenishing stock. These are things that do exist in supermarkets and should exist in all workplaces. Now, we will often start work with a client and do a workplace organization project. They're not just great starting points for continuous improvement, but they're also a fantastic way of team building, bringing people from other departments together that wouldn't normally speak to each other. And again, key to its success and ongoing sustainment is leadership support. It's not an exercise that you do once and expect everything to immediately stick. Use a project that should involve everyone from cleaner up to managing director. No one should be in a position of saying, this is not applicable to me, or I haven't been taught this. The aim of these workplace organization projects, some call it 5S, is to have a place for everything in its place that's clean, ready for use, with the right standards, ownership and accountabilities in place to ensure that it sustains itself. And visual management is one of the keys to success of good workplace organization. I'd just like to share a simple example of that using what's known as a Kanban signal in order for an action to happen. So in the top left, you can see that on the shelf, it's green, meaning that the stock level is okay. Items are removed from the right, and when a yellow shelf is visible, that is the signal to reorder some more. Now here you'll need to know the rate at which these items are used typically, and the lead time of the parts in order to determine where to put the signal. And it needs to be defined who orders the replenishment stock and how it's communicated to that person. Now in this example, there is some safety stock as well. It's obviously been deemed necessary to carry some. But going back to what I was saying earlier about inventory being a waste, this needs to be kept as a minimum, whilst being mindful of the consequences of running out. Back to Tim Woods, and the next waste is waiting, which is fairly self-explanatory in that you are not able to add value as a result of a late delivery or input from an upstream process, be it the arrival of a material or someone having to approve a document, or the lack of communication that something needed to happen. A particularly frustrating one, especially when you can actually see the material that you need and told that you can't have it because the computer says no. This, going back to the third principle of Lean about flow and understanding how value moves from one part of the process to another. On to the first of the two O's, and overproduction. Now, some say that this is the worst type of waste, and that you're adding value to something that has no customer demand for it. So you're adding to an inventory, you're putting the time, resource, and energy into something that may not be sold, may become obsolete, or may become defective over time. Again, there's sometimes a balance to be met here, as your customers will have expectations in terms of lead time. Overproduction may also come from the fact that it's difficult to make a product right first time, the reasons for which can be many and varied, but I'd emphasize the importance of design for manufacture, and when, as an engineer, you are designing something, that you engage with the people that are going to make it and listen to their ideas as to how it can be done effectively. One company that I worked with, the product that they made had a high failure rate. So they were making more than the plan was asking for, on the basis that they knew that some of them were going to be defective. But on average, they were actually adding the product to inventory, which was then invisible on the system. So they were filling up the shelves with perfectly serviceable products that the planners couldn't see. The other O is overprocessing. This is giving the customer more than they are willing to pay for. And as an engineer, I can say that it's something that as engineers are sometimes guilty of. And that is designing something that I would term to be gold-plated, rather than something that is simply good enough and fit for purpose, and which would not impact on revenue. Sometimes you're actually getting more than you pay for without actually realizing it. You've got nothing better to do over the Christmas holidays than take an item of packed food that's unopened, such as a bar of chocolate, and then weigh it and compare that weight with what it states on the package. You may be surprised in the difference. In fact, one company that I worked with was actually giving away on average 20% more than they were stating on the label. Another example of overprocessing from a previous employer is components going through positive metal identification, or PMI. When only certain people were trained to do it, they had to then come away from a value-adding activity that they were doing in order to do PMI on a component that didn't really need it. Absolutely, it's required on components that are pressure retaining and safety critical, as the consequences of failure would be catastrophic, but completely unnecessary on something that was neither of those things. The next one is defects. Again, one that's fairly self-explanatory in that the customer, and again, this could be an internal or an external customer, is not getting what they expect. This can result in rework, so a component going back into the process and thus disrupting the flow, or worse, it can cause something very serious, such as recalls. Now, I mentioned Toyota earlier as a beacon for practicing lean. So it may surprise you to learn that this century they have recalled more cars than anyone else. The further down a process a defect is discovered, the more costly and disruptive it is to put it right. Now, mistakes do happen. We are human beings after all, but it's important to learn from these mistakes and put robust standards in place to ensure that they don't happen again. And then finally, we have skills, which might strike you as a bit of an odd one out. Indeed, this was added over time, as initially it was taken for granted, especially in Japanese culture, that staff are involved and empowered. And this goes back to what I was saying at the start in terms of the importance of empowering people within an organization. People should be an asset that is appreciating value, and if they're not doing that, then that is a waste. Skills is certainly a hot topic at the moment, with all the talk of Industry 4 and digitalization. This is a topic for another day. As new technologies come more and more common and attainable in industry, there needs to be a new skill set in order to implement and maintain them. One thing, though, that I would like to say on that point is that technology is not a substitute for having a good process. Indeed, putting technology into a bad process will amplify that bad process and make things a lot worse than it was before. But conversely, put it into the right part of a good process, and it can really make a difference both in terms of productivity of an organization, but also the skill set of a workforce. We did a learning journey with some clients to Germany last year and visited one company where they made printed circuit boards. They had two lines. One was semi-automated and the other was fully automated. Both, however, employed 5 people. In the semi-automated line, there were 4 unskilled and 1 skilled worker, whereas the opposite was true on the automated line, which had 4 skilled workers and 1 unskilled. So the same amount of people on the new line, but workers were earning more money, doing more rewarding jobs, and putting more of that money back into the local economy. I'd like to finish on skills with an example of a company that recently installed a new enterprise resource planning system. In one sense, from a skills point of view, it was good, in that there was an operator on the factory floor doing a relatively unskilled job, but showed a real interest in this project as they enjoyed working on computers outside of work. They became involved in the project and helped to implement the system in production, and did a more rewarding job as a result. However, the development team in the same company, who are employed for their creativity and the ability to develop new recipes, suddenly found themselves being slaves to a system and having to do effectively administrative roles in order to keep it up to date. That wasn't a result of the operator, may I point out. So it's not just about developing skills within the workforce, but ensuring that the skills that do exist are properly utilized. So that concludes Tim Woods on what the lean wastes are. A non-exhaustive list of what can cause waste is on the screen now. And I'd like to finish off with a home example to reinforce what I've just said. Now, usually I would talk about making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, but seeing as it's just gone 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening close to Christmas, I shall do making a gin and tonic instead. So the value added steps of this are putting some ice in a glass, putting in the gin, then the tonic, and finally a slice of lime. And please don't put in the comments if you think I've put that in the wrong order. To do that value adding part of those activities probably takes less than 10 seconds. Yet when have you ever made a gin and tonic within 10 seconds? You have to find a suitable glass, you then go to the other side of your kitchen to the freezer to get the ice, you then walk to the drawer to find a knife to cut the lime, but it's dirty, so you need to then wash that. You then go to the drinks cupboard that's full of all the other stuff that you'll be drinking over Christmas and what you bought back from holidays over the years, so you need to move them out the way to find the bottle of gin. And when you go to the fridge to get the tonic water, you find that you've run out. And ask someone nicely to nip to the shops to get some more, whilst you have to then wait for them to come back. Now that didn't take 10 seconds. My challenge to you over the Christmas holidays is to make a sub 1 minute gin and tonic. And if at first you don't succeed, then maybe wait a while before trying it again. So how do you go about making process improvements? By reducing the amount of non-value added time. Hopefully you'll agree that none of the stuff that I've said or mentioned today is difficult, but making the time to do it can be if you spend your day doing what are deemed to be urgent activities rather than just important ones. First thing to do is identify what are the opportunities, and I'd like to emphasize the importance to go where the value is added and seeing that part of the process in action. And of course, engaging the right people in doing so. Simply take a step back and observe the process and write down all the wastes and opportunities that you and the team see. And there'll be lots. You're not going to solve them all at once. Now, the tool I use most in my job is the post-it note. Write each of these opportunities on an individual post-it note and then make it visible by putting them on a sheet of paper on the wall. From there, it's time to prioritize them. And I use a simple 2x2 matrix like the one that is on the screen with the benefits, which is simply on a scale of low to high along one axis and the ease of implementation on the other. So as a team, take each post-it note and in turn place it where you think it sits on that matrix. I should point out that it's not the time now to be going into solution mode just yet. You are merely identifying the wastes and opportunities. Those that you think will provide a high benefit and will be easy to implement are the ones that you should focus on first. Those that will provide a high benefit but are difficult will require more in the way of time, resource, and potentially investment in order to solve. That's not to say that this shouldn't be done. We want initially to action and demonstrate a quick win, one that is low risk, easy to do, and will give benefits early on. And just because something has been classed as easy when it has been actioned, it still requires due diligence in terms of being mindful of any unintended consequences and the sponsorship of someone within the organization that will ensure that the changes are supported. And with that, it's important to confirm that any changes that do happen are indeed yielding the anticipated benefits. If for whatever reason they are not, then understand why not and action accordingly. Don't give up. But if they are giving the benefits, then celebrate that success. And celebrating success, it makes people feel good. And this takes us back to where we started. If you feel good, then that will have positive implications on how you think, on how you behave, and therefore on your results. And again, to reiterate, this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, needs perseverance and support. But you'll end up not only with good processes, but also a motivated, engaged, and happy workforce. And that, to me, is the most important thing of all. So, to conclude, what makes a good process? Well, its purpose is understood, it flows, it's visual, it delivers what the customer wants, when they want it, using minimum amounts of resource, and it's improving over time. But importantly of all, it engages people. So, thank you all for listening to me this evening. My ask of you, in addition to trying to make a gin and tonic in less than a minute, is to go and try and make an improvement yourself, be it at work or at home. I would love to hear about it if you do, and I'm happy for you to contact me either on my email address, which is on the screen, or by connecting with me on LinkedIn. I believe you'll be asked for feedback on this presentation, so I would really appreciate it if you would do so, be it good, bad, or ugly, as I need to practice what I preach with regards to continuous improvement. So I'd like to finish off by wishing you all a very safe and happy Christmas, and I'll now hand back to Tegwin for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for that really enjoyable and informative presentation. And now we're heading over to question time. We've had a few questions coming in. Keep your questions coming in, please. So the first question, Alex, is what is an effective way to document processes? Is it necessary to document them?
Yes, absolutely, but in a simple and effective way. I've seen a lot of processes that are documented in arguably too much detail. Again, when we are documenting process, we will map it out on a wall, make it visual, understand what's coming in, what's going out, who's responsible for that, keeping it easy to understand and relatable, and something that all, by engaging the right people, that everyone is aware of that. So yes, they need to be documented, but at the same time, continuously reviewed and improved upon as well.
Okay, that's great. Next question. How long does it take to fully implement process improvements?
Okay. How long is a piece of string, I guess, is the answer. It depends on a number of factors. But as I said, it's not something that happens overnight. We're talking months, possibly years in some cases, to really fully implement. Well, when I talk about process improvements, I mean implementing a culture of continuous improvement and process improvements. It's, as I said, not something that you do as a one-off exercise. I've been in numerous companies in my role as a SMAS practitioner, where they've said, "Oh, we've tried 5S or doing some of this kind of stuff before." It then fell by the wayside. It's difficult to make it sustain, but it needs a lot of support from leadership to do that, and consistency throughout. But when it does start to stick, then it really it grows exponentially. So yeah, it depends on previous companies' experiences of other continuous improvement projects, or what their mindset is towards that. So yeah, it varies, but it's not an overnight job.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Next question: how can I influence processes in my organisation as an early careers engineer?
That's a good question. I think just initially observing the process and asking why it is done the way it is done, and seeing how the response from the person asking the questions is. I would say the most dangerous words that I hear are, "This is the way that we've always done it," and that's not uncommon to come across that. So again, it will depend on the organization that you are working from. Some will be more open to ideas than others. So some will actively encourage suggesting improvements, whereas in other cases it's a little bit harder to perhaps make that case. In any case, though, understanding it, seeing it in action, asking those that you're potentially questioning just to take a step back and observe, gathering robust data to make a case, are all great ways of helping to make that argument. And if you can actually demonstrate something quickly, then that will really open up opportunities for further improvements too.
That's great, thank you, Alex. Next question: what are the best team building exercises that you've seen?
Okay. I'll go back to the workplace organisation example that I gave, which I did with one of my clients recently. And what that allowed, so that, first of all, they ensured that everyone within that organisation went through the training, and we did mixed groups when doing so. So people that wouldn't normally speak or engage with each other got to meet and know them well, and understand why they did or why they do what they do, and understand what the common goal of the company is. And then doing a physical activity after that as a team. So we would then go on to covered the whole site in terms of focusing on an area and doing one of the 5 S's, which I'll save for another time. But just simple things like that is an effective way of doing it. So I've been on team building events within organizations, like the example that I was giving back in my project engineering days. That some of those involve actually doing outdoor teamwork activities, and then but with a work focus as well. So you do something informal during the morning, get to know your colleagues, but then it would be, okay, now get together as a team, present a topic later on that afternoon, and then you'd discuss as a wider team some of the questions and thoughts around that, and yeah, that was a very effective way of, and this included the client as well, which was great too, because it really gave us an understanding as to what what they were looking for, some of the details, and just made working with them a lot easier.
That sounds good. Just coming to the end of the question time now. I've got time for one or two more. Keep your questions coming in. So next question. A lot of people think of lean and process improvements as an assembly line and manufacturing.
Yep.
How would you describe the benefits in oil and gas, e.g. operators, tier 1?
Okay, so lean is, I guess, one tool in a suite of tools that can be used. And just to reiterate, it's not something that I think you should perhaps use every single principle of, but the concept of value-adding activity, understanding what customers are after, and whilst I didn't go into it in the presentation, but thinking about that value stream, how that then affects your suppliers, and essentially treating your suppliers as an extension of the organization, having that common goal, is just as applicable to any industry as it is on something that's doing a car manufacturer or a food manufacturer, so as in the same product coming down a production line. Yes, there are bits of lean that are more applicable to that than others, but that's why I didn't go into too much detail on that. Where you add value and where you don't add value, I would argue, is especially true for oil and gas as well. I've certainly seen a few examples in my career where the benefits of some of these tools within lean have been extremely beneficial to those organizations. It's about using the right tool for the job at the time.
So our final question to you now, Alex, we've only got 2 minutes left. You mentioned that process improvement is a continuous process. Yep. How would you judge what the best timescale is to review the improvements that you've made?
I guess it should be an ongoing activity. So every improvement that is done, and as I said in the presentation, some of the improvements will be very simple, just do it type improvements. Whereas at the opposite end of the scale, there's stuff that will require a big project team together, potentially investment that will take longer to do. But in all cases, communicating and making visible, this is just what we've done to make things better. And again, celebrating that success, so that people are aware and always informed of the changes. It can be quite surprising just to appreciate just how much you have actually done sometimes through these projects. In terms of reviewing which projects should be then done next, that will determine largely on the size of the organization and where issues perceived or otherwise where they lie. So yeah, it's not a one size fits all answer, but certainly keeping a visible record of everything that has been done and an idea or a roadmap, if you like, as to what your next activities are going to be in order to create that common vision. It is a good way of doing that.
Okay, thank you, Alex, for your presentation and for answering the questions that the audience has submitted.
Thank you.
I would just like to take a few minutes of your time to make some announcements about our future events here at the IMechE Aberdeen area. So our next webinar is titled Qualitative Risk-Based Inspection, Keeping It Simple. Our presenter will be Stephen Cool, who is the team lead for fixed and floating structures at DNV-GL here in Aberdeen. Stephen has over 20 years of experience in structural integrity management, working for IMechE, Atkins, Clerk Maxwell, and currently DNV-GL. The event will take place on Friday the 22nd of January at lunchtime from 12 noon to 1 p.m. To sign up, go to the IMechE near you, Scottish Region, Aberdeen area webpage. You can also scan the QR code with your smartphone, which will take you straight to the event registration page. In March next year, we have an online conference titled Hot and Cold, Assuring Fit-for-Purpose Joints, Welded and Non-Welded Connections. The conference is jointly organised by the Aberdeen sections of the Institute of Mechanical Engineers and the Society of Petroleum Engineers. It will take place on the mornings of Wednesday and Thursday, the 3rd and 4th of March. The aim of this conference is to share knowledge and experience of different types of hot and cold connections, including what to look out for to equip engineers working at all levels to ensure joints are fit for purpose. It will address the pitfalls and provide tips and important things to watch out for up front, during installation and throughout the life of the joint. The conference will provide a forum for discussing the issues with subject matter experts, leaving you with ideas to consider and workable solutions. You can register at the address shown or by scanning the QR code, which will take you to the registration page. Conference sponsoring opportunities are available. Sponsoring this event will ensure your logo is prominently positioned across all promotional materials. The Society of Petroleum Engineers and the Institute of Mechanical Engineers are not-for-profit organisations. All surplus funds raised will be invested into various initiatives to help support our future generation of young engineers. The next event after the conference will be our membership surgeries. These surgeries will provide guidance on becoming professionally registered or upgrading your membership. There will be a 30-minute one-to-one session with a business development team member, and this will involve a phone call or video chat. The surgeries take place on Tuesday the 9th of February from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sign up on the IMechE website at the address shown or by scanning the QR code, which is to take you straight to the website address. Don't forget to keep checking our IMechE near you, Aberdeen area website for additional events as they become available. You can also find us on LinkedIn at IMechE-Aberdeen-area. Click on the follow button to get us into your newsfeed. This and other webinars are saved on the IMechE YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow our other social media platforms for the latest information about webinars, conferences, training and other news. So thank you, Alex, for presenting at this webinar tonight. and for all our participants for joining in from all around the world. We look forward to seeing you again at our next event, lunchtime on Friday the 22nd of January.